Dinosaurs have left footprints in stone that echo a world almost impossible for us to fully imagine. As you drift along with these calming stories, you will uncover the strangest truths hidden within the ancient Earth. The sheer scale of the era known as the Mesozoic is difficult to comprehend because it lasted for over 180 million years. To put that vastness into perspective, humanity has existed for a mere fraction of a second on the geological clock compared to the absolute reign of the dinosaurs. While you settle in, if you find comfort in these explorations of our planet's past, please gently like this video and subscribe for more nights of peaceful learning, as this helps us continue gathering these relaxing facts for your rest. When we think of these creatures, we often picture them all living together in a lush, prehistoric jungle, but this is a common misconception born from cinema. The truth of deep time is much more staggered and complex. The Stegosaurus, with its distinctive plated back and spiked tail, had already been fossilized in the ground for millions of years before the Tyrannosaurus rex ever took its first breath. It is a staggering realization that the time separating the Stegosaurus from the T-Rex is actually greater than the time separating the T-Rex from you and me right now. The age of reptiles was not a single moment, but a vast, stretching ocean of time that saw continents drift apart and oceans rise and fall. It was an era so long that distinct worlds rose and fell, divided into the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous periods. Each of these periods lasted for tens of millions of years, hosting entirely different ecosystems that evolved and vanished long before the famous asteroid ever struck. To look at a dinosaur fossil is to look through a window that spans eons, reminding us that the Earth has lived many lives before our own. This concept, known as deep time, suggests that the history of our planet is a heavy, layered book, and dinosaurs occupy hundreds of chapters, while we are merely reading the very last sentence. Evolution during this span was slow and methodical. For instance, the earliest dinosaurs were small, two-legged runners, vastly different from the titans that would come later, yet they all belonged to the same grand lineage that dominated the planet for so long that the stars themselves shifted their positions in the night sky above them. To understand this shifting world, we must look back to a time when the Earth's map was drawn with a single massive stroke. During the Triassic period, which began approximately 252 million years ago, the isolated continents we recognize today were fused together into one colossal supercontinent known as Pangaea. It was a landmass of such immense proportions that it fundamentally altered the climate of the entire globe, creating an environment of extremes that would shape the destiny of every living thing. Because Pangaea was so vast, moisture from the surrounding global ocean, the Panthalassa, struggled to reach the deep interior, resulting in a world that was largely arid and harsh. Scientific models suggest that the center of Pangaea was a vast, dry desert characterized by intense heat and dramatic seasonal shifts, a far cry from the steamy, swampy jungles often depicted in dinosaur movies. There were no polar ice caps during this time, meaning the sea levels were higher and the temperature gradient from the equator to the poles was much gentler than it is now. This dry, red-sanded world emerged from the shadow of the single most devastating event in the history of life, the Permian-Triassic extinction, often referred to by paleontologists as the Great Dying. Just prior to the dinosaurs' debut, roughly 90% of all species on Earth vanished due to massive volcanic activity in what is now Siberia, which altered the atmosphere and acidified the oceans. This cataclysm essentially cleared the stage, leaving the planet eerily quiet and devoid of the dominant reptile groups that had ruled the Permian. It was in this biological vacuum that life began to recover and experiment with new forms, setting the scene for a humble group of survivors to begin their ascent. The very first dinosaurs to evolve in this recovery period were not the earth-shaking giants of our imagination, but rather small, nimble creatures that relied on speed and agility. In the fossil beds of Argentina, specifically within the Ischigualasto Formation, we find evidence of the Eoraptor, or dawn plunderer. Dating back about 230 million years, this creature was only about the size of a medium dog and weighed perhaps 20 pounds. Unlike the lumbering giants that would follow millions of years later, Eoraptor and its kin were built for efficiency. They possessed a unique skeletal structure that allowed them to walk upright on their hind legs, a bipedal stance that was revolutionary at the time. This adaptation freed their front hands to grasp and manipulate food, giving them a distinct advantage over the four-legged reptiles that shared their environment. Examining the teeth of these early dinosaurs reveals another secret to their success. They possessed both serrated teeth for tearing meat and leaf-shaped teeth for grinding plants, suggesting they were opportunistic omnivores capable of eating whatever the harsh Triassic environment provided. At this stage in history, dinosaurs were effectively the underdogs, living in the shadows of larger, crocodile-like predators known as pseudosuchians, which were the true lords of the Triassic plains. However, the dinosaurs possessed hidden physiological advantages, including more efficient breathing systems and potentially faster metabolisms, which allowed them to remain active and grow quickly in the oxygen-poor air of the time. While the heavy armored crocodile relatives dominated the brute force game, the early dinosaurs were quietly perfecting the art of survival, waiting for the ecological scales to tip in their favor. What truly tipped those scales was a subtle, almost invisible shift deep within their skeletal architecture, a modification that would become the very definition of what makes a dinosaur a dinosaur. It all came down to the hips. If you were to examine the skeleton of a lizard, a turtle, or a crocodile, you would find a hip socket that forms a solid cup-like depression where the thigh bone connects. But in dinosaurs, evolution carved out a distinct opening, a literal hole in the center of the hip socket known as a perforate acetabulum. This open window in the bone allowed the head of the femur to turn inward and slot securely beneath the body, rather than splaying out to the sides. This might sound like a minor technicality of anatomy, but it completely revolutionized the physics of movement on Earth. Consider the stance of a modern lizard or salamander. Their legs project sideways, bending at the elbow and knee like a gymnast permanently holding a push-up position. To move, they must use significant muscular energy just to keep their bellies off the ground, and their walk is a side-to-side undulation that twists the spine. Dinosaurs broke this ancient mold. By tucking their legs directly under their hips, they transformed their limbs into vertical pillars. They stood like architectural columns, supporting their weight through bone stacking rather than sheer muscular tension. This meant a dinosaur could stand still for hours with very little effort, while a crocodile would eventually exhaust itself just trying to keep its body elevated. This new stance changed not just how they stood, but how they breathed. There is a biological hurdle known as carrier's constraint, which dictates that when a sprawling animal runs, its body bends sideways, compressing the lung on one side and expanding it on the other. This creates a mechanical conflict that makes it nearly impossible to breathe effectively while moving at high speeds. This is why lizards sprint in short, frantic bursts and then stop abruptly to pant. Dinosaurs, with their legs moving parallel to their bodies like pistons, freed their rib cages from this constraint. They could run and breathe simultaneously, decoupling their gait from their respiration. This granted them a level of active endurance that their competitors simply could not match, allowing them to traverse vast distances in search of food or to relentlessly pursue prey without suffering from immediate oxygen debt. Ultimately, this vertical orientation was the key that unlocked the door to gigantism. The laws of physics dictate that a sprawling animal can only grow so large before the torque on its joints becomes unsustainable. The leverage required to hold a massive body up with sideways legs is simply too great. By aligning their legs with the direct pull of gravity, dinosaurs created a structure capable of bearing immense loads. The skeleton became a weight-bearing scaffold, allowing them to grow heavier and taller without their legs collapsing under the strain. It was this biomechanical breakthrough that laid the foundation for the titans that were to come. With the structural problems solved and the respiratory systems optimized, the stage was set for life to expand on a scale never seen before or since, transitioning the world from the modest beginnings of the Triassic into an era where biology would push the absolute limits of size. This ambition of nature manifested most spectacularly in the sauropods, those titans of the Jurassic that define our collective imagination of the ancient world. When we dream of dinosaurs, we almost inevitably picture these gentle, lumbering mountains of flesh and bone, moving slowly across a verdant landscape like living islands. It is fascinating to realize that the ancestors of these colossi were actually quite small, agile, two-legged creatures that scurried through the undergrowth of the Triassic. But over millions of years, evolution favored bulk, and gravity demanded a return to a four-legged stance, leading to the emergence of the largest land animals to ever walk the earth. Consider the Diplodocus, a creature that stretched the concept of a living organism to nearly unbelievable lengths. Some specimens suggest they could reach over 80 to 90 feet from nose to tail, effectively becoming a biological suspension bridge. Their tails were so long and tapered so finely that physicists believed the very tip could be whipped faster than the speed of sound, creating a sonic boom that would have cracked like thunder across the prehistoric plains, serving perhaps as a means of communication over vast distances or a warning to rivals. Then there was the Brachiosaurus, which took a different approach to enormity, growing upward rather than outward to exploit the untouched canopy of high conifers. Standing taller than a four-story building, these animals were so massive that they lived in a constant battle against physics and thermodynamics. Their sheer volume meant they retained heat incredibly well, leading to the theory that they were effectively inertial homeotherms, maintaining a stable body temperature simply because they were too large to cool down quickly or heat up rapidly. This immense size brings us to one of the most mesmerizing possibilities in paleontology, which suggests that vast herds of these giant sauropods were so large and released so much body heat and moisture through their breath and digestion that they could essentially create their own microclimates. Imagine a dense forest where the humidity and temperature are noticeably different simply because a herd is passing through, the collective warmth of their bodies altering the air currents around them, perhaps even influencing the formation of local mist or fog in the cool mornings. Their digestion alone was a monumental process, with their cavernous stomachs acting as fermentation vats that likely produced significant amounts of heat and gas, further contributing to the atmospheric conditions in their immediate vicinity. To stand in the presence of such a herd would have been a sensory experience unlike anything available in the modern world, engaging not just sight but the entire body. It was not merely about seeing a giant, it was about feeling the environment shift. The footfalls of a 40-ton animal do not just make a sound, they create a seismic ripple. You would have felt the approach of a Brachiosaurus through the soles of your feet long before you saw it emerging from the tree line. Furthermore, their communication likely dipped into the infrasonic range, deep, resonant rumbles below the threshold of human hearing, similar to modern elephants but on a grander scale. These deep, resonant vibrations would travel for miles through the ground and air, creating a sensation of pressure in the chest, a deep, rhythmic thrumming that signaled the presence of life on a scale that the Earth has not supported since. That deep, resonant vibration would have heralded the arrival of the true heavyweights of the Cretaceous, the Titanosaurus.
Among this group of long-necked giants, there are two names that stand above the rest as the contenders for the title of the largest land animal to ever walk the earth: the Argentinosaurus and the more recently discovered Patagotitan. It is difficult for the human mind to truly grasp the scale of these creatures without standing directly in their shadow, for they existed on a level of magnitude that seems almost impossible by modern standards. We are used to the African elephant being the gold standard of size, the largest terrestrial creature we can observe today, yet an adult Argentinosaurus would have looked down upon an elephant much in the way a human might look down at a medium-sized dog. To visualize this sheer mass, we must look beyond biology and turn toward heavy machinery. Estimates vary, as they often do when reconstructing animals from millions of years ago, but paleontologists suggest these titans weighed anywhere from 70 to 80 tons, with some projections reaching even higher. To put that into a perspective that fits our modern world, imagine a Boeing 737 commercial airliner sitting on the tarmac. Now imagine that metal machine is alive, breathing, and walking across a muddy floodplain. That is the tonnage we're dealing with. It's a mass so substantial that the mere act of standing up required biological engineering that pushes the absolute boundaries of physics. This immense size brings us to a certain feeling, one that you might have experienced yourself in a quiet moment of reflection. I wonder if you recall a specific moment visiting a natural history museum, perhaps as a child or even recently, where you stood at the foot of a giant and felt a profound, comforting sense of smallness. There is something uniquely calming about walking into those echoing halls, smelling the old paper and dust, and being dwarfed by the past. It serves as a gentle reminder that we are just one small part of a much larger, older story. A feeling that can be surprisingly restful. If you have a favorite memory of a museum visit, or perhaps a moment in nature where you felt that peaceful insignificance beside something massive, I would love to read about your experience in the comments. Returning to that massive weight, the existence of Patagotitan and Argentinosaurus presents a significant biomechanical puzzle. How did an animal as heavy as a commercial jetliner not simply collapse under its own bulk? If we were to scale up a mouse to the size of an elephant, its bones would snap instantly because weight increases much faster than strength. The answer to this mystery lies hidden inside the bones themselves. You might assume that to support 80 tons, the dinosaur's skeleton would need to be composed of solid, dense columns of calcium, like heavy marble pillars supporting a cathedral. But nature is a far more clever engineer than that. If we were to slice open one of the massive neck vertebrae of a Patagotitan, we would find that it is not solid bone at all. Instead, the interior is an intricate, lattice-like structure filled with air pockets. This evolutionary adaptation is known as skeletal pneumaticity. Much like modern birds, these colossal dinosaurs possessed a system of air sacs that invaded their skeletal tissue, creating a honeycomb-like interior that dramatically reduced the weight of the skeleton without sacrificing its structural integrity. It is a marvel of organic architecture, allowing them to grow to sizes that would otherwise be crushing. This internal lightness meant that while they looked like walking mountains, they were actually far lighter than a solid creature of that size would be, floating, in a sense, on a skeleton filled with breath. This pneumatotic architecture was the key to the sauropod's most iconic feature, the neck, a structure that defies our modern understanding of biological engineering. For decades, we pictured these animals constantly holding their heads high above the treetops, necks curved like the graceful S shape of a swan. But modern biomechanical modeling suggests a different, perhaps more relaxed reality for many of these giants. Instead of constantly fighting gravity to reach the clouds, dinosaurs like Diplodocus likely held their necks in a more horizontal posture, sweeping back and forth across the landscape like a living suspension bridge, a motion that allowed them to clear vast swaths of ferns without taking a single step, conserving precious energy for growth. To support this cantilevered beam of bone and muscle, They relied on a remarkable piece of organic equipment called the nuchal ligament. Imagine a thick, fibrous, elastic band running along the top of the spine, anchored to the shoulders and the back of the skull. This passive tension acted like a heavy-duty counterweight, holding the neck up automatically, which implies that standing with their head extended was actually their resting state, requiring almost no muscular effort at all, a perfect adaptation for a life of slow, steady grazing. But while the bones and ligaments solved the structural problem, the circulatory system faced a challenge of hydraulic pressure that is almost impossible to fathom. Pumping blood from the chest cavity all the way up to a brain that might be 40 feet in the air requires biological machinery of titanic proportions. To fight gravity on this scale, sauropods required the largest hearts ever evolved by land animals. In the towering giraffatan, scientists estimate the heart alone may have weighed over 400 pounds. That is a single organ weighing as much as a fully grown lion, beating slowly and rhythmically within a chest cavity the size of a small room. This colossal pump had to generate blood pressure 3 or 4 times higher than what is found in humans, a pressure so intense it would immediately rupture the blood vessels of any mammal alive today. The walls of the heart's left ventricle would have been inches thick, a dense fortification of muscle squeezing with immense force to drive oxygenated blood up that vertical highway. This extreme pressure created another danger, presenting the puzzle of what happened when the giant lowered his head to drink. Gravity, which the heart fought to push blood up, would suddenly work with the flow, potentially sending a lethal surge of liquid rushing toward the delicate brain. To prevent this, their necks likely contained a complex series of one-way valves and perhaps a network of spongy tissue at the base of the skull, known as a rete mirabilis, to dampen the pressure, slowing the flow to a gentle trickle before it reached the sensitive neural tissue. It is a reminder that these animals were not just big, they were complex, finely tuned machines, where every heartbeat was a victory over the fundamental laws of physics. To fuel such a monumental engine required an intake of energy that strains the limits of our imagination. If you were to look at the skull of a Diplodocus or a Brachiosaurus, you might expect to find massive rows of grinding molars similar to those of a modern horse or cow, designed to pulverize tough plant matter into a paste. But instead, you find something quite delicate. Their teeth were shaped like simple pegs or pencils, positioned only at the very front of the mouth, often looking far too fragile to handle a diet of rough prehistoric conifers. This reveals a fascinating efficiency hack in their evolutionary design. These giants abandoned the concept of chewing entirely. Chewing is, biologically speaking, a very time-consuming process. If a 40-ton animal stopped to thoroughly masticate every mouthful of fern or cycad, there simply wouldn't be enough hours in the day to consume the calories necessary to stay alive.
So they became biological stripping machines. They would clamp those peg-like teeth around a branch and pull back, raking off the leaves and swallowing them whole in a rhythmic, uninterrupted motion, clearing a branch in seconds before moving to the next. But the stomach requires surface area to extract nutrients, so the grinding had to happen somewhere. The solution was geological. These dinosaurs intentionally swallowed stones known as gastroliths. Paleontologists have frequently found these smooth, highly polished rocks nestled within the rib cages of fossilized sauropods, distinct from the surrounding sediment of the dig site. Inside the dark, cavernous, muscular stomach, these stones would tumble against the tough, fibrous plant matter, acting like a biological millstone or an internal rock tumbler. As the dinosaur moved and the stomach muscles contracted, the stones crushed the food that the teeth had left untouched. It is a crude but incredibly effective method of processing vast quantities of roughage without ever needing to pause the intake process at the mouth. Once this pulverized mash moved further into the digestive tract, an even slower, more mysterious process took over. The digestive systems of these giants were likely massive fermentation vats. Because the food sat in the gut for days or perhaps even weeks, immense colonies of bacteria would break down the cellulose. This bacterial fermentation is a chemical process that generates heat.
In fact, it is believed that a significant portion of a sauropod's body warmth came not just from the sun or their own cellular metabolism, but from the literal heat of digestion radiating from within. They were walking furnaces, in the most magnificent sense, generating their own thermal energy through the slow breakdown of ancient forests. This internal fire required constant stoking. It is estimated that a large sauropod would need to consume hundreds of kilograms of vegetation every single day. Some estimates suggest up to 1,000 pounds of greenery for the largest species. This immense hunger meant that they were not just inhabitants of the landscape, but architects of it, clearing vast corridors of vegetation and fundamentally shaping the ecosystem of the Mesozoic simply by satisfying their appetite. To maintain these populations of titans, nature devised a reproductive strategy that seems counterintuitive given their massive adult size. While modern giants like elephants or whales invest heavily in a single calf, nursing and protecting it for years, the sauropods took a different path, known in biology as the R strategy. They played a game of probabilities, laying large clutches of eggs, sometimes dozens at a time, and leaving them to the elements. They relied on the sheer quantity of offspring to ensure that at least a few would survive the perilous journey to adulthood. This leads to one of the staggering physical paradoxes of the Mesozoic era. Because of the limitations of eggshell physics, a dinosaur egg could only grow so large before the shell became too thick for the hatchling to breathe through or break out of. Consequently, a creature destined to weigh 80 tons would hatch from an egg no larger than a soccer ball. These hatchlings emerged into the world weighing perhaps 10 or 15 pounds, looking like tiny, vulnerable miniatures of their parents. To reach their adult size, they had to undergo the most rapid growth spurt of any animal in the history of the Earth, scaling up their body mass by thousands of times in just a few decades. For a long time, paleontologists were puzzled by the scarcity of medium-sized sauropod fossils. It seemed the landscape was filled with tiny babies and massive adults with very little in between. We now understand that this gap exists because the juvenile phase was fleeting. They grew so exponentially fast that they spent very little time as mid-sized animals, racing toward the safety of immense size. However, size wasn't their only shield. The earth beneath our feet preserves the memory of their social lives. Fossilized trackways found in places like Texas and England reveal parallel lines of footprints moving in the same direction, proving that sauropods were not solitary wanderers, but social animals that moved in herds. Even more touching is the arrangement of these prints. In several sets of tracks, the deep, thunderous depressions of the fully grown adults are found on the outer edges of the path, while the smaller, more frantic prints of the younger dinosaurs are clustered in the center. This suggests a protective convoy formation, similar to modern muskoxen or elephants, where the vulnerable young are shielded by a living wall of flesh and bone. The herd provided a collective intelligence, a shared memory of watering holes and feeding grounds, and a formidable defense against predators who would hesitate to attack a solid phalanx of 80-ton giants. While the sauropods relied on their colossal size and social structures for defense, dominating the canopy and the horizon, other herbivores in the valleys below evolved a completely different method of survival. Rather than reaching for the sky, they lowered their centers of gravity and turned their bodies into impregnable fortresses, evolving bone and spike instead of pure mass.
In the lush, fern-carpeted world of the late Jurassic, the most iconic of these living tanks was undoubtedly the Stegosaurus. It remains one of the most instantly recognizable silhouettes in the entire fossil record. A creature that looks almost like a child's drawing brought to life with its exaggerated features and strange proportions. Rising from the arched spine of this four-legged giant were two alternating rows of bony plates, known technically as osteoderms. These impressive structures were not actually attached to the animal's skeleton. Instead, they floated within the thick, leathery skin, anchored by strong connective tissue, much like the scutes of a modern crocodile. For decades, scientists puzzled over the true purpose of these kite-shaped billboards. Initially, the prevailing theory suggested they were purely defensive, a jagged shield designed to deter the crushing jaws of predators like Allosaurus. However, upon closer inspection, the plates appear somewhat fragile for heavy combat, and fossil analysis reveals they were riddled with grooves for blood vessels.
This intricate vascular network hints at a more subtle physiological function, thermoregulation. It is entirely possible that the Stegosaurus acted as a living solar panel, turning its broadside to the morning sun to warm its blood quickly after a cool night, or flushing the plates with fluid to release excess heat during the humid afternoons. In recent years, a third theory has gained traction among paleontologists, suggesting these plates were primarily for show, growing large and colorful to attract mates or intimidate rivals without ever having to strike a blow. While the plates might have been for show, the business end of the animal was undeniably built for war. At the tip of the flexible, muscular tail sat 4 horizontal spikes, each up to 3 feet long. This weapon is unique in the animal kingdom, used to lash out sideways with devastating speed and precision. In a delightful twist of scientific nomenclature, this spike cluster is officially called the thagomizer. This is not a term derived from Latin or Greek roots, but rather from a 1982 cartoon by Gary Larson titled The Far Side. In the comic, a caveman points to a picture of a Stegosaurus tail and explains that it is named after the late Thag Simmons. Paleontologists, possessing a keen sense of humor, adopted the term informally until it eventually found its way into serious peer-reviewed papers and museum displays. We even have physical evidence of the thagomizer's effectiveness. A fossilized Allosaurus vertebra has been found with a puncture wound that perfectly matches the shape of a Stegosaurus spike, capturing a moment of prehistoric violence frozen in stone for 150 million years. Despite its formidable weaponry, the Stegosaurus is often remembered for a less flattering statistic: its brain size. It is true that for an animal weighing nearly 7 tons, its brain was exceptionally small, often compared to the size of a walnut or a lime. This disparity fueled the early myth that dinosaurs were slow, sluggish, and evolutionary failures. There was even a mistaken belief that they possessed a second brain in their hips to help control their massive hind legs, a theory that has since been debunked. That cavity likely held a glycogen body for energy storage. Yet judging the Stegosaurus by the size of its cranial cavity misses the point of evolution. It did not need to solve complex puzzles or engage in high-level social strategy. It needed to eat low-lying vegetation, smell approaching predators, and reflexively swing its tail at the right moment. For millions of years, that small processor was perfectly adequate, allowing this armored fortress to thrive across the floodplains of western North America. Complexity is not always the goal of nature. Survival is. Survival took its most robust and formidable form in the late Cretaceous period with the rise of the ankylosaurs, the undisputed living tanks of the prehistoric world. While other dinosaurs chased the evolutionary advantages of speed or pack tactics, this lineage doubled down on a different strategy: absolute impenetrability. They became wide, low-slung fortresses that essentially carried a shield on their backs, a shield so effective that they could simply hunker down and wait for danger to pass. This armor was not merely tough skin or hardened scales, it was a genuine bone that grew within the deeper layers of the skin, floating in the dermis rather than attaching to the skeleton. It's the same kind of armor we see on modern crocodiles and armadillos, but taken to a magnificent extreme. These bony plates varied in size from tiny pebble-like studs filling in the gaps to massive keel-shaped scutes that acted as spikes. In some species, this mosaic of bone was coated in a layer of keratin, the same material as your fingernails, which added a sharp, resilient sheath to the heavy bone beneath. The commitment to total defense was so comprehensive that evolution didn't even spare the softest, most vulnerable parts of the anatomy. In many ankylosaur species, even the eyelids were armored. They possessed specialized bony shutters, osteoderms shaped specifically to fit the orbit of the eye. When the animal blinked or sensed a threat, these bony plates would slide down, sealing the eye behind a literal door of bone. It turns the concept of a blink into a defensive maneuver, ensuring that there was no weak point, no soft opening for a claw or tooth to exploit. At the posterior end of this walking bunker lay one of nature's most effective weapons. The tail club of an ankylosaur is a marvel of organic engineering. The tail was not just a heavy appendage. The rear vertebrae were fused together into a single stiff rod of bone, eliminating flexibility to create a rigid handle. At the very tip, large osteoderms fused into a dense, heavy knob, sometimes weighing as much as 100 pounds. This structure allowed for a swing of tremendous velocity. Biomechanical studies suggest that a fully grown ankylosaur could generate enough force with a lateral swipe of its tail to shatter the metatarsals of a Tyrannosaurus rex. It was a singular bone-crushing capability that could leave a top predator crippled and unable to hunt, which in the wild is a death sentence. Yet, despite this capacity for violence, the life of an ankylosaur was likely one of profound quiet. Picture this armored giant in the warm, hazy afternoon of a Cretaceous fern prairie. It moves with a slow, swaying rhythm, ripping up low-lying vegetation with a broad beak. It does not need to run. It does not need to hide. There is a deep, hypnotic peace in an animal that knows it is nearly invincible. When a predator approaches, the ankylosaur does not panic. It simply tucks its legs beneath its shield, lowers its center of gravity, and becomes a jagged hill of unappetizing bone. The predator, sensing the futility of the effort, moves on, leaving the tank to resume its slow, steady grazing in the prehistoric sun. While the ankylosaur relied on solitude and armor, another group of survivors chose a different path to dominance, conquering the late Cretaceous not with spikes, but with unparalleled efficiency and community. These were the hadrosaurs, widely known as the duck-billed dinosaurs, though their resemblance to ducks ends at the superficial shape of their snouts. In reality, these animals were the crowning achievement of herbivorous evolution, becoming the most successful and diverse plant eaters to ever walk the earth. If you were to stand in the lush floodplains of North America or the deltas of Asia 66 million years ago, these are the giants you would see filling the landscape, moving in herds that might have numbered in the thousands. Their immense success was largely due to a remarkable piece of biological engineering hidden inside their mouths. While earlier giants like the long-necked sauropods simply stripped branches and swallowed vegetation whole, relying on gut bacteria to break it down, the hadrosaurs became master chewers. They possessed what scientists call dental batteries, a complex grinding system that has no equivalent in the modern world. Inside the jaw of a single hadrosaur, there were not merely a few dozen teeth, but often hundreds, sometimes up to 1,000, packed tightly together in compact columns. These teeth formed a continuous, rough pavement that acted like a biological file, capable of pulverizing the toughest pine needles, twigs, and abrasive horsetails. As the surface teeth wore down from this constant grinding, new teeth from deep within the jaw would migrate upward to replace them, ensuring that the animal never ran out of chewing power, no matter how old it grew. Because they were so populous, they have left behind some of the most intimate secrets of the prehistoric world. In rare and beautiful instances, natural mummification occurred before fossilization, leaving us with breathtaking dinosaur mummies. Perhaps the most famous of these belong to the genus Edmontosaurus. These fossils revealed not just the bones, but the texture of the skin itself, preserved in three-dimensional sandstone. We can see that they were not covered in feathers like their raptor cousins, but in a complex mosaic of non-overlapping scales. There were clusters of larger hexagonal scales surrounded by smaller pebbles, creating patterns that likely varied from individual to individual, much like a fingerprint. These mummified remains have even reshaped our understanding of their silhouettes. For a long time, we pictured them with smooth, sloping backs, but the soft tissue preservation shows that some hadrosaurs sported a running ridge of fleshy spines down their spine, similar to an iguana. Even more surprisingly, recent analysis of an Edmontosaurus mummy revealed a fleshy comb on top of its head, resembling the comb of a rooster, a feature entirely invisible if we only looked at the skull. These soft structures suggest that even the species without bony crests were heavily invested in visual display, signaling to one another across the herds that grazed the ancient plains. Yet, while some dinosaurs relied on soft tissues to signal, others committed their very skeletons to the art of display, evolving into the spectacular horned giants known as ceratopsians.
When we think of these animals, the Triceratops inevitably comes to mind, standing like a rhinoceros tank in the golden light of the Cretaceous. For generations, paleontologists viewed the massive bony frill extending from the back of a Triceratops skull as a piece of military equipment, a solid shield of bone evolved specifically to protect the vulnerable neck from the crushing bite of a Tyrannosaurus rex. It is a dramatic image, the knight in bone armor fending off the dragon. But the truth hidden in the fossils suggests something far more complex, and perhaps even more beautiful. Many relatives of the Triceratops, such as the regal Chasmosaurus, possessed frills that were not solid bone at all. They were framed by strong borders, yes, but the center of the frill contained massive openings, large windows called fenestrae, which were covered only by a thin stretch of skin. If these were intended as shields, they were carefully designed, for a predator could have bitten right through them with little effort. This structural vulnerability has led experts to a softer conclusion. The frills were likely billboards. These vast surfaces were probable canvases for biological art, flushed with blood and vivid colors to signal dominance to rivals or allure to potential mates, much like the tail of a peacock, proving that even in a world of giants, vanity played as large a role as survival. But while their heads were busy signaling, their mouths were busy destroying the toughest vegetation the prehistoric world had to offer. We often picture herbivores as peaceful grazers munching on soft grass, but grass as we know it was not a common food source. The Triceratops had to eat tough, fibrous palms and woody cycads. To handle this, they evolved a mouth that functioned less like a cow's and more like an industrial machine. Behind their parrot-like beaks, they possessed batteries containing up to 800 teeth stacked in tight columns. Unlike mammals that grind side to side, ceratopsians chewed with a vertical motion. Their teeth sheared past each other like scissor blades, self-sharpening with every bite, allowing them to literally slice through woody stems that would have worn down the teeth of almost any other animal. This durability allowed them to live long lives, and it is in their aging process that we find one of the most mind-bending possibilities in paleontology. In the late 19th century, scientists discovered a dinosaur that looked very much like a Triceratops, but with a longer, perforated frill. They named it Torosaurus. For over a century, these two stood as separate species in museum halls. However, recent studies of bone microstructure have sparked a fierce debate. The bone of the Triceratops frill is often found to be young and still growing, while Torosaurus specimens are universally old and mature. This has led to the hypothesis that the Triceratops is actually just a teenager. As it grew into its final senior years, its solid frill may have expanded and thinned, eventually opening up holes to become the shape we classify as Torosaurus. It implies that these animals underwent radical shapeshifting, morphing their very skulls as they matured, hiding their true adult forms from us for millions of years. It is a gentle reminder that the fossils we find are often just snapshots of a single moment in a long, changing life. While the ceratopsians expanded their skulls backward into wide fans to solve the problem of social signaling, their distant cousins took the concept of head ornamentation in a completely different and somewhat more blunt direction. These were the pachycephalosaurs, the thick-headed lizards who turned their skulls into battering rams. The most famous among them, Pachycephalosaurus, possessed a skull roof that was up to 10 inches thick, a density of bone that is almost difficult to comprehend. To put that in perspective, it is a solid mass of calcium and mineral, heavier and denser than a bowling ball, sitting right atop the animal's neck.
For decades, the assumption was straightforward and dramatic. We looked at modern bighorn sheep or musk oxen, animals that settle disputes with violent head-on collisions, and we projected that behavior onto these dinosaurs. We imagined the prehistoric forests echoing with the loud cracks of bone striking bone as two rivals charged one another to secure territory or mates. But the reality of this behavior has sparked intense debate among paleontologists, turning the head-bunting theory into a complex biomechanical puzzle. Some researchers argued that a direct high-speed impact between two animals of that size would have been fatal, potentially snapping their necks or causing severe brain trauma, regardless of how thick the helmet was. This led to the theory of flank butting, where the animals might have stood parallel to one another and swung their heavy heads sideways, aiming for the softer ribs of their opponent, using the dome more like a heavy club than a battering ram. Yet the fossils themselves eventually offered a counter-argument written in scar tissue. When scientists examined the microstructure of these domes, they found that the bone was unique.
It was a type of rapidly healing, fibrous bone that seemed specifically designed to withstand compression and recover from damage. Furthermore, nearly a quarter of all Pachycephalosaurus skulls discovered show signs of healed lesions and fractures located directly on the top of the dome, rather than the sides. This pathology suggests that they did indeed engage in direct combat, perhaps interlocking their heads and shoving in a test of strength rather than charging from a distance. Or perhaps they really were resilient enough to withstand the shocks of a duel. The skull was often decorated with a fringe of bony knobs or spikes around the back, creating a crown that made the animal look even more imposing. But this heavy ornamentation, the frills of the ceratopsians, the clubs of the ankylosaurs, and the helmets of the pachycephalosaurs did not evolve solely for ritual combat between rivals. These features were also the result of a terrifying evolutionary arms race. Every shield and every weapon possessed by these herbivores was a necessary adaptation to survive in a world patrolled by a specific group of animals that viewed all this armor as merely a wrapper to be peeled away. The landscape was dominated by the theropods, the meat eaters, whose lineage included the most efficient killing machines to ever walk the earth. These were the theropods, a name that translates somewhat ominously to beast-foot. While the sauropods we just left behind were busy grazing on the high canopy with 4 sturdy pillars for legs, the theropods adopted a different stance entirely. They remained bipedal, balancing their massive bodies on 2 powerful hind legs, a posture that acted as a fulcrum for speed and agility. This upright design is one of the great successes of evolution, freeing the front limbs to become grasping hands, weapons, or eventually wings. For we must remember that birds are the living descendants of this very lineage. Their bones were hollow, much like those of modern aviators, a trait known as skeletal pneumaticity, which kept their skeletons light despite their immense size, allowing for quick bursts of speed that would have been terrifying to witness. In the Jurassic period, the undisputed king of this domain was not the famous Tyrannosaurus, who would not arrive for tens of millions of years, but the Allosaurus. Often called the lion of the Jurassic, the Allosaurus was the most abundant large predator of its time, prowling the fern-covered floodplains of what is now North America. It is a creature that seems familiar, yet recent science has revealed it was quite different from the later tyrants. One of the most perplexing discoveries involves the mechanics of its jaws. When engineers modeled the bite force of an Allosaurus, they found something unexpected. Despite its terrifying appearance, its bite was relatively weak, perhaps no stronger than that of a modern leopard, which is remarkably gentle for a creature that could grow nearly 30 feet long. This seeming weakness forced paleontologists to look closer at the skull, which was built with unusual strength and reinforced specifically to withstand vertical impact. This has led to the hatchet hypothesis. Instead of crushing bone with brute force, the Allosaurus likely used its entire head as a weapon. It could open its jaws incredibly wide, far wider than most predators, essentially turning its upper jaw into a serrated axe. It would swing its head down, driving the upper teeth into the flesh of a stegosaurus or a young sauropod, causing massive trauma and blood loss rather than crushing the animal outright. It was a surgical striker, relying on speed and shock rather than the overwhelming power seen in later epochs.
The difference between these Jurassic hunters and the later Cretaceous tyrants is a fascinating study in escalation. The Allosaurus was leaner, with longer arms that ended in 3 large hooked claws useful for grappling with struggling prey. In contrast, the later Tyrannosaurs sacrificed arm length for massive head size and bite force. The Jurassic was a time of slicing teeth and grasping hands, a world where the predators were agile slashers. There is even evidence suggesting they may have been social, or at least tolerant of one another. At the famous Cleveland Lloyd dinosaur quarry in Utah, the remains of dozens of Allosaurus individuals have been found together, hinting that they might have formed loose mobs to take down the colossal sauropods that no single hunter could manage alone, swarming like wolves around a bison. But as the eras shifted and the continents drifted further apart, the evolutionary strategy changed from the agility of the pack to the overwhelming power of the individual. In the late Cretaceous, this culminated in the arrival of the tyrant lizard king, the Tyrannosaurus rex, a creature that has captivated the human imagination more than any other. While popular culture often depicts them roaring constantly, the mechanics of this animal were far more terrifyingly efficient than simple noise. The T-Rex possessed the strongest bite force of any terrestrial animal that has ever lived, a claim backed by the dense, robust architecture of its skull.
While other carnivorous dinosaurs had teeth shaped like knives, designed to slice through flesh, the Tyrannosaurus had teeth that resembled serrated bananas, thick and reinforced with deep roots. This dental structure suggests a different feeding strategy entirely. It didn't just cut, it crushed. Engineering models estimate its bite force could reach nearly 13,000 pounds, enough to pulverize solid bone. This ability, known as osteophagy, allowed the T-Rex to access the mineral-rich marrow inside the bones of its prey, a nutritional source that lighter, slashing predators simply could not reach. The sound of a T-Rex feeding would not have been the wet tearing of meat, but the thundering crack of shattering skeletons echoing through the prehistoric forests. This prowess was guided by sensory equipment that was equally advanced, contracting one of the most persistent myths in cinema. For years, people believed that if you stood perfectly still, a T-Rex could not see you. However, paleontological analysis of the brain case and eye placement reveals that the Tyrannosaurus rex possessed binocular vision, with eyes facing forward rather than to the sides, giving it overlapping fields of view and depth perception that was actually superior to that of a modern hawk. If you were to stand frozen in front of this apex predator, you would not be invisible. You would simply be an incredibly easy target, viewed in high-definition clarity. As we picture this magnificent creature, perhaps it brings to mind a small plastic figurine you might have held as a child. Did you have a favorite dinosaur toy that sat on your bedside table, a silent guardian watching over you while you slept? There is a profound nostalgia in these ancient shapes, a sense of safety found in their strength that stays with us long after we have grown up. That strength was not just in the jaw, but in the sheer undeniable bulk of the animal. For a brief period in scientific history, a theory emerged suggesting the T-Rex was purely a scavenger, a slow-moving giant that only ate what was already dead because it was too heavy to hunt. We now know this was a misunderstanding of its anatomy. While it certainly never turned down a free meal, the T-Rex was a biologically expensive animal to maintain, requiring massive caloric intake that scavenging alone could rarely support. Its body was a marvel of biological engineering designed for power walking rather than sprinting. It possessed massive leg muscles and a tail that acted as a heavy counterbalance, allowing it to pivot quickly despite weighing up to 9 tons. The neck muscles alone were strong enough to toss a fully grown human into the air as easily as you might toss a grape. It was not a sluggish giant lumbering aimlessly, but an active, warm-blooded hunter with a metabolism that demanded fuel, patrolling its territory with a stride that would have caused the ground to tremble rhythmically, a tactile warning to anything hiding in the underbrush. That trembling ground served as a prelude to a sensory experience we can scarcely imagine. While popular cinema often depicts the T-Rex as having movement-based vision, implying that standing still would render you invisible, the fossil record tells a different, far more formidable story.
The structure of its skull reveals that the Tyrannosaurus rex possessed binocular vision, with forward-facing eyes that provided excellent depth perception, likely superior to that of a modern hawk. If you were to stand frozen in front of this apex predator, you would not be invisible. You would simply be an incredibly easy target, viewed in high-definition clarity. Yet, even if you were completely obscured by the dense ferns of the Cretaceous undergrowth, the giant would still know you were there, thanks to an olfactory capability that borders on the supernatural. CT scans of the T-Rex brain case reveal olfactory bulbs that are truly massive, occupying a significant portion of the brain's volume. This suggests that the dinosaur perceived the world primarily through a landscape of sense, able to detect a carcass or a living herd from miles away, tracking odors carried on the wind with the precision of a bloodhound, though on a scale appropriate for a 7-ton predator. However, amidst this biological perfection of eyes and nose, there is one feature that has puzzled paleontologists for a century: those famously diminutive arms. It seems almost contradictory that a creature so large would possess forelimbs no longer than a human's. For decades, these arms were dismissed as vestigial remnants of a time when its ancestors walked on 4 shrinking away as the head became the primary weapon. But closer inspection of the arm bones revealed deep scarring where massive muscles would have attached. These were not withered limbs, they were incredibly strong, capable of bench pressing hundreds of pounds each. The theories regarding their purpose are as varied as they are fascinating. Some scientists suggest they were used to clasp onto partners during mating, a necessary tool for stability in such massive animals. Others propose they functioned like meat hooks, holding struggling prey close to the body so the jaws could do their work.
There is even a biomechanical theory suggesting the arms had to shrink simply to counterbalance the weight of that enormous heavy skull. If the arms had been proportional to the body, the T-Rex might have tipped forward. As this creature moved through the forest, it likely did not roar with the open-mouthed scream of a lion, as movies would have us believe. The structure of its vocal organs suggests it produced a closed-mouthed vocalization, similar to the low booming of a bittern or the rumble of a crocodile, but deepened to a terrifying magnitude. This was infrasound, a low-frequency resonance below the range of human hearing, capable of traveling for miles through dense vegetation. You would not have heard a T-Rex approaching so much as you would have felt it, a deep rhythmic thrumming in your chest cavity, a visceral vibration warning that the king was asserting its presence. Yet, if you were to travel back to the Cretaceous swamps of North Africa, that feeling of dread might not come from the thud of footsteps on the ground, but from a sudden, massive displacement of water. Here lived a creature that has confused and captivated paleontologists perhaps more than any other dinosaur, the Spinosaurus. For decades, this animal was misunderstood as merely a slightly different version of a Tyrannosaurus, with a large fin on its back, a landlocked titan that stood on 2 powerful legs and occasionally snapped at fish near the shore. But the Earth has slowly yielded secrets that paint a far stranger, more fluid picture of this predator. We now understand that Spinosaurus was likely the largest carnivorous dinosaur to ever exist, outsizing even the Tyrannosaurus in length, yet its construction was entirely unique. The scientific image of this beast has shifted dramatically over the years. At first, it was reconstructed as a standard bipedal theropod. Then, fossils revealed curiously short hind legs and a long, low center of gravity, leading some researchers to speculate it might have walked on all 4 limbs, dragging its knuckles like a giant anteater. It is a creature that seems to have been assembled from spare parts of other animals: the narrow, sensitive snout of a gharial, the long neck of a stork, and that iconic 6-foot-tall neural spine sail rising from its vertebrae. The true nature of this animal was finally unlocked with the recent discovery of its tail. Unlike the stiff, balancing tails of land predators, which acted as counterweights for running, the Spinosaurus possessed a wide, flexible, paddle-like tail, shaped almost exactly like a massive oar. When combined with recent studies on its bone density, a clear truth emerged. Most meat-eating dinosaurs possessed hollow bones to stay light and agile on land. but Spinosaurus had solid, dense bones, remarkably similar to those of modern penguins or manatees. This density allowed it to submerge and control its buoyancy underwater. It was not a monster that stood on the muddy banks waiting for a fish to swim by. It was a river monster, a fully aquatic hunter, pursuing giant coelacanths and sawfish through the murky depths. This extreme specialization makes perfect sense when you consider the terrifying world it inhabited. The fossil formations known as the Kem beds in Morocco preserve an ecosystem that scientists describe as the most dangerous place in the history of our planet. It presents a biological puzzle. In most healthy ecosystems, there are vast numbers of herbivores and very few top predators. But in the Kem beds, the fossil record reveals an overwhelming number of massive carnivores living side by side: Carcharodontosaurus, Deltadromeus, and Spinosaurus. The only way such giants could coexist without constantly killing one another was by partitioning their world. While others fought for territory on the dusty plains, the Spinosaurus claimed the wide, winding river systems, ruling a submerged kingdom where its sail would slice through the surface like a warning flag from the deep. While the River King patrolled the depths, the arid scrublands and dunes far beyond the water's edge belonged to a very different kind of hunter. Here, agility mattered far more than sheer size, and the dominant design philosophy shifted towards the sleek, feathered forms of the dromaeosaurs, the family of dinosaurs we commonly call raptors. There is perhaps no group of ancient animals more shrouded in pop culture myth than these agile predators. When most of us drift into a daydream about the velociraptor, we tend to picture the formidable human-sized antagonists of cinema, scaly, highly intelligent, and hunting in coordinated squads. The reality buried in the red rocks of Mongolia, however, offers a creature that is less of a movie monster and more of a biological marvel. The true Velociraptor mongolensis was actually quite small, roughly the size of a large modern turkey or a coyote. It did not tower over humans, rather it stood only about half a meter high at the hip. Furthermore, it was not covered in sleek reptilian scales, but was almost certainly coated with a thick layer of feathers, giving it the appearance of a fierce, ground-dwelling hawk with a long, stiff tail. The confusion regarding their size often leads back to a close cousin of the velociraptor, known as Deinonychus. This North American predator was significantly larger, roughly the size of a wolf, and it was this animal that truly inspired the terrifying attributes seen in movies. Due to a temporary quirk in taxonomic classification during the late 20th century, the names were briefly conflated in popular literature, lending the dramatic name of the smaller velociraptor to the dangerous body of the larger Deinonychus. Yet, regardless of their size, what united this family was the terrifying elegance of their anatomy, specifically the infamous killing claw found on the second toe of each foot. For decades, paleontologists believed this sickle-shaped claw was used as a slashing blade, designed to cut open prey in a single sweeping motion. However, modern biomechanics and microscopic analysis have refined this view into something arguably more fascinating. The claw was not a knife, but a crampon. This behavior is described by a theory known as raptor-prey restraint. Just as a modern golden eagle will drop from the sky to pin a wolf or a deer, using its talons to grip and hold the struggling animal, the dromaeosaurs likely used their sickle claws to latch on to the backs of larger dinosaurs. They were climbers as much as runners, leaping onto their victims and using those curved hooks to anchor themselves securely to the hide, pinning the prey down under their own weight while delivering precise bites. This image of a solitary precision hunter challenges another long-held belief, the idea of a cooperative pack. We love to imagine raptors working together like wolves, communicating with complex signals to flank their quarry, but the fossil evidence paints a picture of a more independent existence. Chemical studies of their teeth reveal that juvenile raptors ate entirely different diets than adults, suggesting that parents did not feed their young and that the group did not share meals. It is highly probable that instead of a coordinated military unit, they were solitary ambush predators who might have converged on a kill in a disorganized mob,
tolerating each other as long as there was enough meat to go around, much like modern Komodo dragons. They were silent, feathered ghosts of the undergrowth, relying on individual skill rather than social cooperation to survive in a world of giants. But while their behavior may have mirrored the solitary dragons of today, their appearance was undergoing a transformation that would completely rewrite our understanding of the past. For over a century, the collective imagination of humanity pictured these creatures as oversized iguanas, draped in drab, pebbly skin that hung loose on their frames, gray and green monsters lumbering through sweltering swamps. That view has been quietly dismantled, fossil by fossil, revealing that the Mesozoic era was not merely a world of hard scales, but a vibrant, textured landscape of plumage. This is the feather revolution, a paradigm shift that has softened the edges of these terrible lizards and bridged the vast chasm between the ancient giants of the earth and the birds singing in the trees outside your window. We now understand that feathers did not evolve for flight. Evolution is rarely so forward-thinking; it solves immediate problems. The first feathers were likely simple, hollow filaments, looking more like the fuzz on a peach or the soft bristles of a paintbrush than the complex aerodynamic quills we see on an eagle. Their primary purpose was almost certainly insulation. Just as a down duvet traps heat against your body on a cold winter night, these early biological coats allowed dinosaurs to maintain high activity levels even as temperatures dropped. This simple fact suggests that many dinosaurs were warm-blooded, active animals, needing to retain their metabolic heat rather than basking in the sun like sluggish reptiles waiting for energy. Consider the Utaranus, a distant cousin of the Tyrannosaurus rex. While we often imagine the T-Rex as a sleek, scaly killing machine, the Utaranus proves that immense size was no barrier to being soft. Weighing over a ton, this predator was covered head to tail with thick, shaggy feathers. Imagine standing in a prehistoric forest during a Cretaceous winter in what is now northern China. Snow falls gently through the canopy of conifers, silencing the world, dampening sound just as it does today. Through the white haze, a massive shape moves. It is not a cold, shivering reptile, but a warm, steaming creature, its breath clouding in the frosty air, its heavy coat of feathers dusted with fresh snowflakes. It is a scene that feels less like a monster movie and more like a glimpse into a lost, majestic ecosystem that functioned with the same thermodynamic rules as our own. These feathers eventually became tools for display, evolving from simple fuzz into complex structures capable of showing off. We have found evidence of melanosomes, pigment cells, preserved in stone, telling us that dinosaurs saw the world in vivid color. Some boasted tails striped in chestnut and white, ringing signals to mates or rivals that rippled through the undergrowth like a flag.
The famous velociraptors, so often depicted as scaly goblins, were in reality bird-like predators with large wing feathers attached to their forearms. They could not fly, but they likely used these wings to cover their nests, keeping their eggs warm and dry, or to balance themselves while pinning down prey, looking far more like fierce, ground-dwelling hawks than naked lizards. Flight was merely a happy accident, a byproduct of features that had evolved millions of years earlier for warmth and communication, allowing a single lineage of these feathered dinosaurs to survive. The famous velociraptors, so often depicted as scaly goblins, were in reality bird-like predators with large wing feathers attached to their forearms. They could not fly, but they likely used these wings to cover their nests, keeping their eggs warm and dry, or to balance themselves while pinning down prey, looking far more like fierce, ground-dwelling hawks than naked lizards. Flight was merely a happy accident, a byproduct of features that had evolved millions of years earlier for warmth and communication, allowing a single lineage of these feathered dinosaurs to survive the apocalypse and inherit the sky. With the realization that feathers were ancestral to dinosaurs, the curtain was pulled back on a world far more vibrant than the gray, elephantine lizards of early textbooks.
For decades, artists had to guess at the colors of these beasts, usually defaulting to the muddy greens and browns of modern crocodiles, but the fossil record held a microscopic secret that would eventually turn those monochrome sketches into technicolor reality. It turns out that pigment is surprisingly durable, and deep within the fossilized remains of feathers and skin, paleontologists discovered melanosomes, tiny cellular organelles that bear the chemical signature of color. The shape of these microscopic structures provides a translation key for the ages. We learned that long, sausage-shaped melanosomes correspond to black and gray pigments, while round, meatball-shaped ones indicate warm, rusty reds. By mapping these shapes across a fossil, we can literally paint by numbers across millions of years. This technique revealed that Sinosauropteryx, a small ground-dwelling theropod, possessed a long tail banded with distinct stripes of ginger and white, looking strikingly like the tail of a modern lemur or raccoon. It suggests that pattern and display were vital parts of their lives, perhaps used to signal dominance or attract a mate in the dense undergrowth, proving they were far more than mindless eating machines. The application of this science brought us face to face with Anchiornis, a small Peruvian dinosaur that we now know was colored in stark black and white, with a brilliant woodpecker red crest of feathers adorning its head. We even found evidence of iridescence in the feathers of Microraptor, meaning its plumage would have shimmered with the glossy oil-slick blues and purples seen on the neck of a raven today. This structural color suggests these animals were active during the day, relying on acute vision and visual signaling, much like the birds that would eventually descend from them. But color wasn't just for showing off, it was also for hiding. One of the most spectacular fossils ever found, the armored Borealpata, was so well preserved it looked like a statue sleeping in stone. Chemical analysis of its skin films revealed it utilized countershading, boasting a dark reddish-brown back that faded to a lighter belly. This represents a sophisticated form of camouflage that counteracts the shadows cast by the sun, flattening the animal's appearance against the ground to make it harder to spot. The fact that a dinosaur built like a living tank, covered in bone spikes, still needed camouflage tells us just how terrifying the predators of the Cretaceous period truly were. Even the indestructible needed to blend in. We have even discovered that some dinosaur eggs were colored. The Oviraptorid Heyuana laid eggs that were deep blue-green, allowing them to blend into leafy ground nests, much like the eggs of emus or cassowaries. These splashes of color confirm that the Mesozoic era was not a drab era of lumbering monsters, but a visually complex world where survival often depended on the specific shade of one's scales or the dazzling pattern of one's feathers, a legacy of vibrancy that lives on in every cardinal and peacock alive today. While color leaves a distinct trace in the shape of microscopic pigment structures, sound is far more elusive, vanishing effectively the moment the air stops vibrating. This presents a profound challenge for those seeking to reconstruct the prehistoric world, as the soft tissues responsible for vocalization, the delicate folds of a larynx, or the complex syrinx found in modern birds, rarely preserve in the fossil record. For a long time, the soundtrack of the Mesozoic was a realm of pure speculation, filled in by our imaginations with generic hisses and roars, but physics and comparative anatomy have recently allowed us to listen in on the past with surprising clarity. We know now that the structures of dinosaur skulls often acted as natural amplifiers. The Parasaurolophus, a large duck-billed dinosaur, possessed a magnificent curved crest extending backward from its skull. For years, this was thought to be a snuncle for underwater feeding, or perhaps a weapon for headbutting, but we now understand it functioned as a biological resonance chamber. Inside the crest, tubes looped back and forth, remarkably similar to the piping of a trombone. By forcing air through these complex nasal passages, the animal could produce a deep, mournful tone.
Computer simulations of this airflow suggest the sound was a low-frequency bellow, a haunting melody capable of traveling from miles through dense, tangled vegetation, allowing members of the herd to maintain contact without ever seeing one another. This reliance on low-frequency sound challenges the most famous cinematic depiction of dinosaurs, the open-mouthed, earth-shattering roar. The terrifying scream of a lion or a tiger requires very specific vocal anatomy that dinosaurs likely did not possess. Instead of roaring, evidence suggests that even the largest predators, including the Tyrannosaurus rex, utilized closed-mouth vocalizations. This is a technique seen today in animals like ostriches and crocodiles, the closest living relatives of dinosaurs. By inflating a pouch in the throat while keeping the beak or jaws firmly shut, the animal pushes air across vocal tissues to create a resonating chamber within the neck itself. The result is not a shriek, but a deep, booming thrum. Imagine standing in a Cretaceous forest and feeling a vibration in the ground before you hear a sound. The call of a T-Rex would likely have been a subsonic rumble, a frequency so low it is barely audible to the human ear, but powerful enough to rattle your ribcage from a distance. These infrasonic sounds are incredibly efficient for large animals, cutting through wind and rain to signal territorial boundaries or attract mates over vast distances. Even the armored ankylosaurs, often conceptualized as silent, wandering tanks, possessed complex, looping nasal passages that suggests they too could modify the pitch of their breath, perhaps snorting or grunting in specific patterns to communicate. If you were to close your eyes and listen to that ancient world, you would not hear a chaotic cacophony of monsters screaming. Instead, the air would be thick with a heavy ambient hum. You would hear the melodic, brassy hooting of hadrosaurs echoing through the morning mist, the rhythmic, guttural cooing of giant theropods, and the deep, seismic thrum of heavy breathers lurking in the ferns. It was a soundscape of vibrating pressure and heavy atmosphere, more akin to the deep bubbling of a swamp or the booming of a bittern than the roaring of a jungle cat. A symphony of rumbles that grounded these giants in a reality far more complex and perhaps more unsettling than fiction. This acoustic depth hints at a social complexity that completely rewrites the old, dusty narrative of dinosaurs as solitary, cold-blooded monsters who abandoned their eggs in the sand. Instead, the fossil record has begun to reveal a tenderness that bridges the gap between the ancient reptile and the modern bird, showing us that love and protection are not new inventions of the mammalian brain, but ancient instincts that governed the Mesozoic world. Take, for instance, the Maiasaura. Its name literally translates to good mother lizard, a title earned through spectacular evidence found in the Two Medicine Formation of Montana. Paleontologists discovered not just one nest, but a vast nesting colony, suggesting these hadrosaurs returned to the same site year after year, much like modern seabirds returning to a cliffside. The nests were earth-mounded bowls spaced exactly one adult body length apart. A layout implied a crowded, bustling, yet organized nursery where neighbors respected each other's space while keeping the community tight against predators. Inside these nests, we find one of the most heartwarming clues in paleontology. The eggshells were trampled into tiny fragments. If the babies had hatched and immediately left, the shells would have remained largely intact. The fact that they were crushed into powder suggests the hatchlings stayed in the nest for a long time and were fed by parents who brought them leaves, berries, and seeds. It paints a picture of a dinosaur bringing breakfast to bed, a level of parental investment that requires immense energy and care. This instinct to protect extends to one of the most unfairly maligned creatures in history, the oviraptor. When this dinosaur was first, computer simulations of this airflow suggest the sound was a low-frequency bellow, a haunting melody capable of traveling from miles through dense, tangled vegetation, allowing members of the herd to maintain contact without ever seeing one another. This reliance on low-frequency sound challenges the most famous cinematic depiction of dinosaurs, the open-mouthed, earth-shattering roar. The terrifying scream of a lion or a tiger requires very specific vocal anatomy that dinosaurs likely did not possess.
Instead of roaring, evidence suggests that even the largest predators, including the Tyrannosaurus rex, utilized closed-mouth vocalizations. This is a technique seen today in animals like ostriches and crocodiles, the closest living relatives of dinosaurs. By inflating a pouch in the throat while keeping the beak or jaws firmly shut, the animal pushes air across vocal tissues to create a resonating chamber within the neck itself. The result is not a shriek, but a deep, booming thrum. Imagine standing in a Cretaceous forest and feeling a vibration in the ground before you hear a sound. The call of a T-Rex would likely have been a subsonic rumble, a frequency so low it is barely audible to the human ear, but powerful enough to rattle your ribcage from a distance. These infrasonic sounds are incredibly efficient for large animals, cutting through wind and rain to signal territorial boundaries or attract mates over vast distances. Even the armored ankylosaurs, often conceptualized as silent, wandering tanks, possessed complex, looping nasal passages that suggests they too could modify the pitch of their breath, perhaps snorting or grunting in specific patterns to communicate. If you were to close your eyes and listen to that ancient world, you would not hear a chaotic cacophony of monsters screaming. Instead, the air would be thick with a heavy ambient hum. You would hear the melodic, brassy hooting of hadrosaurs echoing through the morning mist, the rhythmic, guttural cooing of giant theropods, and the deep, seismic thrum of heavy breathers lurking in the ferns. It was a soundscape of vibrating pressure and heavy atmosphere, more akin to the deep bubbling of a swamp or the booming of a bittern than the roaring of a jungle cat, a symphony of rumbles that grounded these giants in a reality far more complex and perhaps more unsettling than fiction. This acoustic depth hints at a social complexity that completely rewrites the old, dusty narrative of dinosaurs as solitary, cold-blooded monsters who abandoned their eggs in the sand. Instead, the fossil record has begun to reveal a tenderness that bridges the gap between the ancient reptile and the modern bird, showing us that love and protection are not new inventions of the mammalian brain, but ancient instincts that governed the Mesozoic world. Take, for instance, the Maiasaura. Its name literally translates to good mother lizard, a title earned through spectacular evidence found in the Two Medicine Formation of Montana. Paleontologists discovered not just one nest, but a vast nesting colony, suggesting these hadrosaurs returned to the same site year after year, much like modern seabirds returning to a cliffside. The nests were earth-mounded bowls, spaced exactly one adult body length apart. A layout implied a crowded, bustling, yet organized nursery where neighbors respected each other's space while keeping the community tight against predators. Inside these nests, we find one of the most heartwarming clues in paleontology. The eggshells were trampled into tiny fragments. If the babies had hatched and immediately left, the shells would have remained largely intact. The fact that they were crushed into powder suggests the hatchlings stayed in the nest for a long time and were fed by parents who brought them leaves, berries, and seeds. It paints a picture of a dinosaur bringing breakfast to bed, a level of parental investment that requires immense energy and care. This instinct to protect extends to one of the most unfairly maligned creatures in history, the oviraptor. When this dinosaur was first discovered in the Gobi Desert in the 1920s, it was found lying directly on top of a clutch of eggs. Because those eggs were initially thought to belong to a herbivore called Protoceratops, scientists branded the oviraptor a thief, assuming it had been caught in the act of raiding the nest for a meal. For decades, it carried the name egg thief as a badge of dishonor. However, science eventually corrected this tragic misunderstanding. Decades later, a similar egg was cracked open to reveal a tiny fossilized embryo inside. It wasn't a Protoceratops at all. It was a baby oviraptor. The adult hadn't been stealing the eggs, it had been sitting on them. It was brooding, likely using its feathered arms to shield the clutch from a sandstorm or the cold desert night when it was buried alive. It died protecting its unborn children, transforming its legacy from a villainous thief to a devoted parent who made the ultimate sacrifice. Thinking about that protective embrace might remind you of your own safe havens. I'd love to know, Is there a particular place from your childhood, perhaps a specific room or a hidden corner, where you felt completely safe and tucked away from the world?
This brooding behavior provides a direct link to birds. Fossils have been found with adults sitting in the center of the nest, their arms spread wide to cover the perimeter, keeping the eggs warm with their body heat. In the case of the Troodon, another bird-like dinosaur, studies of egg clutches show they were laid in pairs, suggesting the mother had two functional oviducts, unlike modern birds which usually only have one. Yet the arrangement of the bones often suggests the father was the one brooding the nest, waiting patiently in the dangerous prehistoric wild for the next generation to break through the shell. We even have evidence of dinosaur daycares. A fossil block of Psittacosaurus shows one single adult surrounded by 34 juveniles. Since no single parent would lay that many eggs at once, it suggests a communal system where one adult stood guard over the young of the entire group, allowing the others to forage. A quiet moment of cooperation that softens the sharp edges of a world we often imagine as purely violent. Once those hatchlings emerged into the light, their lives became a race against time, driven by biological engines that were far more powerful than we once believed. For decades, paleontologists assumed that because dinosaurs were reptiles, they must have grown slowly, plodding along like modern tortoises or crocodiles, which can take an entire human lifetime to reach their full, impressive size. But the truth hidden inside their fossilized bones tells a much faster, more energetic story. By slicing thin cross-sections of dinosaur legs and examining them under high-powered microscopes, scientists discovered something remarkable: lines of arrested growth. These are microscopic rings in the bone tissue that function almost exactly like the rings inside an ancient oak tree. Each ring represents a year of life, usually marking a season where resources were scarce, causing the animal's growth to temporarily pause. By counting these rings, we learned that dinosaurs lived fast and grew with astonishing speed. A Tyrannosaurus rex, for instance, was not a slow-growing giant, but a biological rocket. In its teenage years, a T-Rex would undergo an explosive growth spurt, gaining roughly 5 pounds every single day. Imagine a creature packing on nearly 2 tons of muscle and bone in just a few short years, transforming from a live, swift hunter into the heavyweight champion of the Cretaceous. This growth rate suggests they possessed a metabolism that burned hotter than a reptile's, perhaps occupying a unique middle ground known as mesothermy, allowing them to dominate the landscape through sheer speed of development. However, this rapid ballooning in size often came with physical transformations so drastic that they confused scientists for over a century. We now understand that dinosaurs didn't just get bigger as they aged, many of them fundamentally shape-shifted, a process known as ontogeny. This realization has unraveled a few prehistoric mysteries, revealing that several different-looking dinosaurs were actually just the same animal at different stages of life. The most famous example involves the Pachycephalosaurus, the dinosaur known for its thick, domed skull. For years, museums displayed a smaller, flat-headed dinosaur with spikes covering its nose, which they named Dracorex hogwartsi, meaning the Dragon King of Hogwarts. There was also a medium-sized version with a small dome and large spikes called Stygimoloch. Recent analysis suggests these were not 3 separate species, but rather a baby, a teenager, and an adult. As the young dragon-like dinosaur matured, the spikes on its nose were reabsorbed into the bone, and the skull thickened and rose into the famous battering ram dome. It is a reminder that fossils are merely snapshots of a fluid life. We see similar shape-shifting in the Triceratops, whose backward-facing frill changed shape and texture as it aged, eventually developing large holes in the bone to reduce weight, leading some to believe that the massive Torosaurus was actually just an elderly Triceratops. These revelations show us that the dinosaur world was not just a collection of static monsters, but a dynamic population of creatures constantly changing, growing, and reinventing themselves as they survived the years.
This capacity for change implies a biology far more complex than we once imagined, extending deep into the metabolic engines that powered their massive bodies. For decades, a quiet scientific battle raged over the internal temperatures of these beasts. In the early days of paleontology, dinosaurs were often dismissed as sluggish, cold-blooded reptiles, creatures that required the warmth of the sun to heat their blood before they could move with any urgency, much like a modern lizard waiting on a rock for the morning light to chase away the chill of the night. However, this image clashed violently with the anatomy scientists began to uncover: skeletons built for sustained speed, agility, and immense power, traits that demand a high-octane fuel source and a metabolism capable of supporting it. The resolution to this mystery lies in a fascinating biological compromise known as mesothermy. It appears that dinosaurs were likely neither fully cold-blooded, like a crocodile, nor fully warm-blooded, like a lion, but occupied a middle ground that is rare in the modern world. This state of mesothermy allowed them to generate their own body heat through metabolism, raising their internal temperature significantly above that of their surroundings, yet they did not strictly maintain a rigidly fixed temperature the way humans or other mammals do. It is a strategy we see today in only a handful of distinct creatures, such as the great white shark or the leatherback sea turtle, animals that can patrol the cold, crushing depths of the ocean while keeping their cores warm and responsive. Possessing this flexible internal furnace meant that dinosaurs were not slaves to the ambient temperature of the air. They could grow at astonishing rates, a fact recorded in the microscopic structure of their bones. When we look thin slices of dinosaur fossils under a microscope, we see dense networks of blood vessels and rapid bone remodeling that look strikingly similar to fast-growing mammals, rather than the slow, seasonal growth rings of a reptile. This rapid growth, however, came with a heavy price tag in the form of calories. To fuel such a demanding metabolism, dinosaurs had to be voracious eaters, consuming vast quantities of ferns, cycads, or prey to keep their internal fires burning bright. This energy-expensive lifestyle paid off by allowing them to conquer corners of the globe that would have been lethal to a standard reptile. We now know that dinosaurs thrived in the polar regions, living in ancient Alaska and Antarctica during periods when these places, though warmer than they are today, still experienced months of total darkness and freezing temperatures. A cold-blooded animal would have perished in the long winter night, unable to move or hunt, but the mesothermic dinosaur, perhaps wrapped in a coat of primitive feathers for insulation, could remain active and dominant year-round. This ability to regulate their own heat, to essentially carry their climate within them, was likely the single most important factor that allowed them to reign supreme over the planet for over 160 million years, outcompeting the true mammals who scurried in the undergrowth. But even with this warm-blooded vitality driving them forward, their dominance came with a steep physical cost, leaving behind scars that science can now read like braille on the surface of fossilized bone. This field of study is known as paleopathology, the investigation of ancient injury and disease, and it reveals that the lives of these giants were defined by a staggering level of resilience. When we look closely at museum mounts, we aren't just seeing structural supports, we are looking at a medical history recorded in calcium. One of the most profound examples comes from a famous Allosaurus specimen known as Big Al, discovered in the Badlands of Wyoming. Big Al is not merely a statue of a predator, he is a biography of survival against the odds. His skeleton preserves evidence of no fewer than 19 distinct injuries and subsequent infections that he lived with for some time. His ribs showed signs of having been fractured and then healed over, knitting back together in the wild. Perhaps most painfully, the bones in his foot displayed massive abnormal growth consistent with a deep, long-term infection, likely causing him to limp through the Jurassic fern prairies in constant discomfort. The fact that Big Al and countless other dinosaurs like him survived long enough for these devastating injuries to heal tells us something remarkable about their biology. In a world without veterinarians, without antibiotics, and without the safety of a hospital, These animals possessed immune systems and healing capabilities that were nothing short of aggressive. Their bones often show thick, lumpy masses of callus tissue, a kind of biological cement where fractures were encased in new bone to stabilize the break. This process was often messy, resulting in limbs that healed crookedly or ribs that fused together, yet the animal kept moving, kept hunting, and kept living. We see similar tenacity in the tyrannosaurs, whose skulls often bear the healed gouges of teeth from other T-Rexes, remnants of violent disputes over territory or mates that turned into face-biting contests. Yet not all pathology was born of battle. The sheer weight of existence caused injuries too. The massive, pillar-like legs of the sauropods frequently display stress fractures, cracks caused not by predators, but by the relentless crushing burden of gravity acting upon their multi-ton frames. This durability suggests that dinosaurs lived on a razor's edge, where the ability to withstand trauma was just as critical as size or speed. It paints a portrait of a stoic existence, enduring pain and physical stress as a baseline of daily life. They carried these burdens while navigating a landscape that was itself unforgiving, a prehistoric environment that presented challenges far greater than just the animals inhabiting it. To understand the dinosaur, one must understand the garden in which it walked, a botanical landscape that would feel both familiar and alien to our modern eyes.
The ground beneath their heavy feet was not the soft, grassy turf we might imagine in a modern park, for grass, curiously enough, is a relatively new invention of nature, largely absent from the majority of the Mesozoic era. Instead, the low-lying world was a carpet of primitive greenery, dominated by vast spreads of ferns, horsetails, and club mosses. These ancient ground covers created a damp, verdant sponge that would have muffled the footsteps of even the heaviest giants, holding moisture close to the earth in a humid embrace. Looking upward, the skyline was pierced by gymnosperms, plants with exposed seeds that did not bloom with petals, including the towering conifers that have relatives still clinging to existence today. The Araucaria, often called the monkey puzzle tree, with its sharp scale-like leaves, stood as a sentinel in these forests, evolving its prickly armor specifically to deter the long necks of browsing sauropods. These trees were pillars of immense biological stability, growing slowly and offering a meal that was fibrous, resinous, and difficult to break down. Alongside them grew the cycads, stout plants with rough, armored trunks and crowns of stiff, palm-like fronds, though they were not palms at all. They were tough and often filled with natural toxins, demanding a digestive system of immense fortitude to process efficiently. Imagine walking through a forest where the air carries the distinct, pungent scent of the ginkgo trees, living fossils that formed a canopy of fan-shaped leaves. In the autumn of the Jurassic, these leaves likely turned a brilliant gold, just as they do now, a seasonal rhythm that has remained virtually unchanged for over 200 million years. It makes one wonder, do you have a specific memory of the smell of a forest after the rain, or the scent of pine needles warming in the sun? These sensory details connect us across eons to these vanished worlds. However, the stillness of this green and brown world was eventually broken by a revolution of color. Deep in the Cretaceous period, nature introduced the angiosperms, or flowering plants. This was a biological pivot point that Charles Darwin once referred to as an abominable mystery due to its sudden and rapid appearance in the fossil record. Where once there were only cones and spores, suddenly there were magnolias, ancestors of lilies, and broad-leafed trees expanding rapidly to catch the solar energy. This botanical revolution transformed the menu of the prehistoric world, offering nutrient-dense fruits and rapidly growing foliage that fueled new strategies for survival. We see this shift reflected clearly in the changing architecture of dinosaur skulls. The simple, peg-like teeth of early highbrowsers gave way to the complex, grinding dental batteries of the hadrosaurs and ceratopsians,
animals built to act as biological mowers for this new, diverse, and rapidly regenerating vegetation. This evolutionary toolkit allowed them to conquer the globe, pushing their range far beyond the steamy tropics and into the high latitudes, leading to one of the most atmospheric discoveries in the fossil record, the existence of dinosaurs at the poles. When we think of Antarctica today, we picture an inhospitable sheet of white ice, but during the reign of these animals, the continents were positioned differently and the global climate was much warmer. The polar regions were not frozen deserts, but lush, temperate rainforests filled with ferns, cycads, and towering conifers that carpeted the ground in a soft, green embrace. However, despite the lack of massive glacial ice caps, these regions presented a unique and formidable challenge that required specialized adaptation: the polar winter. Because of the Earth's tilt, these high-latitude forests were plunged into total darkness for months at a time, creating a world of midnight sun in the summer and a long, starry night in the winter. The dinosaurs that lived here were not merely visitors migrating through, they were permanent residents of the twilight. In the rocks of what is now Australia and Antarctica, we find the bones of Leoleninosaura, a small bipedal herbivore that likely scurried through the undergrowth while the rest of the world slept. The most striking feature of this little animal was the size of its eyes and the corresponding optic lobes in its brain, suggesting it had evolved acute night vision to forage in the months of perpetual gloom. It paints a cozy, almost magical picture of small, fuzzy dinosaurs navigating a cool, dark forest lit only by the moon and the shimmering curtains of the southern lights overhead. In the northern hemisphere, specifically in the ancient sediments of Alaska, we find evidence of the Nanosaurus, a name that translates to the polar bear lizard. This was a close relative of the mighty Tyrannosaurus rex, but it was significantly smaller, likely an adaptation to the scarcity of food and resources during the long, dark winters. Paleontologists believe that Nanosaurus and its neighbors almost certainly possessed a thick coat of insulating feathers to trap body heat, transforming our image of scaly monsters into animals that looked more like giant predatory birds puffing up against the chill.
The existence of these polar residents is one of the strongest arguments we have for dinosaurs being warm-blooded or endothermic, as a cold-blooded reptile simply could not have generated the internal heat necessary to survive a winter where the temperature dropped near freezing. Instead of hibernating, these resilient creatures remained active, leaving their footprints in the mud and perhaps even the snow, exhaling clouds of steam into the crisp polar air as they moved through the silent, frozen ferns. But eventually, even these hardy polar wanderers would fall, and usually that would be the end of the story, for nature is incredibly efficient at recycling life. In the vast majority of cases, sun, rain, and scavengers dismantle a creature's remains within weeks, returning its nutrients to the ecosystem. This makes the existence of any fossil a statistical anomaly, a true defiance of the odds. To become a fossil is to win a geological lottery, requiring a sequence of events so precise that it borders on the miraculous. An animal must die in exactly the right place, perhaps near a riverbed or a sudden mudslide, where sediment can bury it rapidly, sealing it away from the air and the organisms that would otherwise destroy it. Because this specific set of circumstances is so incredibly rare, paleontologists estimate that we likely know of less than 1% of all dinosaur species that ever lived. When you close your eyes and imagine the prehistoric world, realize that for every T-Rex or Triceratops we have discovered, there were hundreds of other unique species, creatures with strange crests, vibrant colors, or unusual behaviors that lived and died without leaving a single trace. We are effectively looking through a tiny keyhole at a vast, vibrant room we can never fully enter, piecing together a global puzzle with 99% of the pieces missing. For the lucky few that were buried quickly, the transformation from biology to geology began in the dark, quiet pressure of the Earth. It is a slow alchemy known as permineralization.
Over thousands and millions of years, groundwater rich in minerals like silica, calcite, and iron seeped down through the layers of sediment, infiltrating the tiny, porous spaces within the bone. Drop by drop, the water deposited these microscopic crystals. Eventually, the original organic material decayed, but the minerals remained, crystallizing and taking the exact shape of the bone cells. What we find today is not the bone itself, but a perfect rock replica, a stone casting of a life that once was, often colored by the specific minerals in the soil, red from iron or black from manganese. While bones and teeth are hard enough to survive this transition with some regularity, soft tissues like skin, muscle, and feathers almost always vanish without a whisper. Yet there are rare and magical sites known by the German term Lagerstätten, meaning storage places, where the conditions were so chemically perfect that even soft tissues were preserved. In these quiet lagoons or stagnating seabeds, oxygen levels were so low that bacteria could not do their work to break down the body. Here, the sediment acted like a soft blanket, capturing the delicate impression of a feather, the outline of a stomach, or the texture of scales. These exceptional sites give us our only true glimpse into the soft reality of these animals, turning a skeleton into a fully realized, textured being, and proving that the fossil record still holds secrets waiting in the stone. When we look beyond the famous giants that dominate museum halls, we find that evolution was in a playful, almost experimental mood during the Mesozoic era, producing creatures that defy our expectations of what a dinosaur should look like. Some of these obscure species appear less like biological realities and more like sketches from a fantasy novel. Consider the Nigersaurus, a sauropod that took the long-necked body plan and adapted it for a very specific low-level grazing lifestyle. Its most peculiar feature was its mouth, which was not narrow or pointed, but shaped remarkably like the nozzle of a vacuum cleaner. Its jaw was wider than the rest of its skull, a broad, flat trap lined with hundreds of slender teeth packed into the very front of its mouth. It did not chew, it simply mowed, cropping ferns and soft ground vegetation with a mechanized efficiency that is unlike anything we see in the modern world. While the Nigersaurus was strange, other dinosaurs were a baffling mix of terrifying features and gentle behaviors. The Therizinosaurus is perhaps the greatest example of this contradiction. For years, paleontologists only knew this animal by its claws, massive scythe-like blades that measured over 3 feet in length. It was natural to assume these belonged to a nightmare predator, a slasher of the ancient forests, capable of taking down any rival. However, once a complete skeleton was finally assembled, the truth proved to be far more surprising. These formidable weapons were attached to a pot-bellied, wide-hipped, sluggish giant that ate nothing but plants. It likely used those 3-foot swords not to hunt, but to gently hook onto tree branches to pull leafy boughs closer to its mouth, or perhaps to strip bark from trunks. It appears that dinosaurs were likely neither fully cold-blooded, like a crocodile, nor fully warm-blooded, like a lion, but occupied a middle ground that is rare in the modern world. This state of mesothermy allowed them to generate their own body heat through metabolism, raising their internal temperature significantly above that of their surroundings, yet they did not strictly maintain a rigidly fixed temperature the way humans or other mammals do. It is a strategy we see today in only a handful of distinct creatures, such as the great white shark or the leatherback sea turtle, animals that can patrol the cold, crushing depths of the ocean while keeping their cores warm and responsive. Possessing this flexible internal furnace meant that dinosaurs were not slaves to the ambient temperature of the air. They could grow at astonishing rates, a fact recorded in the microscopic structure of their bones. When we look thin slices of dinosaur fossils under a microscope, we see dense networks of blood vessels and rapid bone remodeling that look strikingly similar to fast-growing mammals, rather than the slow, seasonal growth rings of a reptile. This rapid growth, however, came with a heavy price tag in the form of calories. To fuel such a demanding metabolism, dinosaurs had to be voracious eaters, consuming vast quantities of ferns, cycads, or prey to keep their internal fires burning bright. This energy-expensive lifestyle paid off by allowing them to conquer corners of the globe that would have been lethal to a standard reptile. We now know that dinosaurs thrived in the polar regions, living in ancient Alaska and Antarctica during periods when these places, though warmer than they are today, still experienced months of total darkness and freezing temperatures. A cold-blooded animal would have perished in the long winter night, unable to move or hunt, but the mesothermic dinosaur, perhaps wrapped in a coat of primitive feathers for insulation, could remain active and dominant year-round. This ability to regulate their own heat, to essentially carry their climate within them, was likely the single most important factor that allowed them to reign supreme over the planet for over 160 million years, outcompeting the true mammals who scurried in the undergrowth. But even with this warm-blooded vitality driving them forward, their dominance came with a steep physical cost, leaving behind scars that science can now read like braille on the surface of fossilized bone. This field of study is known as paleopathology, the investigation of ancient injury and disease, and it reveals that the lives of these giants were defined by a staggering level of resilience. When we look closely at museum mounts, we aren't just seeing structural supports, we are looking at a medical history recorded in calcium. One of the most profound examples comes from a famous Allosaurus specimen known as Big Al, discovered in the Badlands of Wyoming. Big Al is not merely a statue of a predator, he is a biography of survival against the odds. His skeleton preserves evidence of no fewer than 19 distinct injuries and subsequent infections that he lived with for some time. His ribs showed signs of having been fractured and then healed over, knitting back together in the wild. Perhaps most painfully, the bones in his foot displayed massive abnormal growth consistent with a deep, long-term infection, likely causing him to limp through the Jurassic fern prairies in constant discomfort. The fact that Big Al and countless other dinosaurs like him survived long enough for these devastating injuries to heal tells us something remarkable about their biology. In a world without veterinarians, without antibiotics, and without the safety of a hospital, these animals possessed immune systems and healing capabilities that were nothing short of aggressive. Their bones often show thick, lumpy masses of callus tissue, a kind of biological cement where fractures were encased in new bone to stabilize the break. This process was often messy, resulting in limbs that healed crookedly or ribs that fused together, yet the animal kept moving, kept hunting, and kept living. We see similar tenacity in the tyrannosaurs, whose skulls often bear the healed gouges of teeth from other T-Rexes, remnants of violent disputes over territory or mates that turned into face-biting contests. Yet not all pathology was born of battle. The sheer weight of existence caused injuries too. The massive, pillar-like legs of the sauropods frequently display stress fractures, cracks caused not by predators, but by the relentless crushing burden of gravity acting upon their multi-ton frames. This durability suggests that dinosaurs lived on a razor's edge, where the ability to withstand trauma was just as critical as size or speed. It paints a portrait of a stoic existence, enduring pain and physical stress as a baseline of daily life. They carried these burdens while navigating a landscape that was itself unforgiving, a prehistoric environment that presented challenges far greater than just the animals inhabiting it. To understand the dinosaur, one must understand the garden in which it walked, a botanical landscape that would feel both familiar and alien to our modern eyes.
The ground beneath their heavy feet was not the soft, grassy turf we might imagine in a modern park, for grass, curiously enough, is a relatively new invention of nature, largely absent from the majority of the Mesozoic era. Instead, the low-lying world was a carpet of primitive greenery, dominated by vast spreads of ferns, horsetails, and club mosses. These ancient ground covers created a damp, verdant sponge that would have muffled the footsteps of even the heaviest giants, holding moisture close to the earth in a humid embrace. Looking upward, the skyline was pierced by gymnosperms, plants with exposed seeds that did not bloom with petals, including the towering conifers that have relatives still clinging to existence today.
The Araucaria, often called the monkey puzzle tree, with its sharp, scale-like leaves, stood as a sentinel in these forests, evolving its prickly armor specifically to deter the long necks of browsing sauropods. These trees were pillars of immense biological stability, growing slowly and offering a meal that was fibrous, resinous, and difficult to break down. Alongside them grew the cycads, stout plants with rough, armored trunks and crowns of stiff, palm-like fronds, though they were not palms at all. They were tough and often filled with natural toxins, demanding a digestive system of immense fortitude to process efficiently. Imagine walking through a forest where the air carries the distinct, pungent scent of the ginkgo trees, living fossils that formed a canopy of fan-shaped leaves. In the autumn of the Jurassic, these leaves likely turned a brilliant gold, just as they do now, a seasonal rhythm that has remained virtually unchanged for over 200 million years. It makes one wonder, do you have a specific memory of the smell of a forest after the rain, or the scent of pine needles warming in the sun? These sensory details connect us across eons to these vanished worlds. However, the stillness of this green and brown world was eventually broken by a revolution of color. Deep in the Cretaceous period, nature introduced the angiosperms, or flowering plants. This was a biological pivot point that Charles Darwin once referred to as an abominable mystery due to its sudden and rapid appearance in the fossil record. Where once there were only cones and spores, suddenly there were magnolias, ancestors of lilies, and broad-leafed trees expanding rapidly to catch the solar energy. This botanical revolution transformed the menu of the prehistoric world, offering nutrient-dense fruits and rapidly growing foliage that fueled new strategies for survival. We see this shift reflected clearly in the changing architecture of dinosaur skulls. The simple, peg-like teeth of early highbrowsers gave way to the complex, grinding dental batteries of the hadrosaurs and ceratopsians, animals built to act as biological mowers for this new, diverse, and rapidly regenerating vegetation. This evolutionary toolkit allowed them to conquer the globe, pushing their range far beyond the steamy tropics and into the high latitudes, leading to one of the most atmospheric discoveries in the fossil record, the existence of dinosaurs at the poles. When we think of Antarctica today, we picture an inhospitable sheet of white ice, but during the reign of these animals, the continents were positioned differently and the global climate was much warmer. The polar regions were not frozen deserts, but lush, temperate rainforests filled with ferns, cycads, and towering conifers that carpeted the ground in a soft, green embrace. However, despite the lack of massive glacial ice caps, these regions presented a unique and formidable challenge that required specialized adaptation: the polar winter. Because of the Earth's tilt, these high-latitude forests were plunged into total darkness for months at a time, creating a world of midnight sun in the summer and a long, starry night in the winter. The dinosaurs that lived here were not merely visitors migrating through, they were permanent residents of the twilight. In the rocks of what is now Australia and Antarctica, we find the bones of Leoleninosaura, a small bipedal herbivore that likely scurried through the undergrowth while the rest of the world slept. The most striking feature of this little animal was the size of its eyes and the corresponding optic lobes in its brain, suggesting it had evolved acute night vision to forage in the months of perpetual gloom. It paints a cozy, almost magical picture of small, fuzzy dinosaurs navigating a cool, dark forest lit only by the moon and the shimmering curtains of the southern lights overhead. In the northern hemisphere, specifically in the ancient sediments of Alaska, we find evidence of the Nanosaurus, a name that translates to the polar bear lizard. This was a close relative of the mighty Tyrannosaurus rex, but it was significantly smaller, likely an adaptation to the scarcity of food and resources during the long, dark winters. Paleontologists believe that Nanosaurus and its neighbors almost certainly possessed a thick coat of insulating feathers to trap body heat, transforming our image of scaly monsters into animals that looked more like giant predatory birds puffing up against the chill. The existence of these polar residents is one of the strongest arguments we have for dinosaurs being warm-blooded or endothermic, as a cold-blooded reptile simply could not have generated the internal heat necessary to survive a winter where the temperature dropped near freezing. Instead of hibernating, these resilient creatures remained active, leaving their footprints in the mud and perhaps even the snow, exhaling clouds of steam into the crisp polar air as they moved through the silent, frozen ferns. But eventually, even these hardy polar wanderers would fall, and usually that would be the end of the story, for nature is incredibly efficient at recycling life. In the vast majority of cases, sun, rain, and scavengers dismantle a creature's remains within weeks, returning its nutrients to the ecosystem. This makes the existence of any fossil a statistical anomaly, a true defiance of the odds. To become a fossil is to win a geological lottery, requiring a sequence of events so precise that it borders on the miraculous. An animal must die in exactly the right place, perhaps near a riverbed or a sudden mudslide, where sediment can bury it rapidly, sealing it away from the air and the organisms that would otherwise destroy it. Because this specific set of circumstances is so incredibly rare, paleontologists estimate that we likely know of less than 1% of all dinosaur species that ever lived. When you close your eyes and imagine the prehistoric world, realize that for every T-Rex or Triceratops we have discovered, there were hundreds of other unique species, creatures with strange crests, vibrant colors, or unusual behaviors that lived and died without leaving a single trace. We are effectively looking through a tiny keyhole at a vast, vibrant room we can never fully enter, piecing together a global puzzle with 99% of the pieces missing. For the lucky few that were buried quickly, the transformation from biology to geology began in the dark, quiet pressure of the Earth. It is a slow alchemy known as permineralization. Over thousands and millions of years, groundwater rich in minerals like silica, calcite, and iron seeped down through the layers of sediment, infiltrating the tiny, porous spaces within the bone. Drop by drop, the water deposited these microscopic crystals. Eventually, the original organic material decayed, but the minerals remained, crystallizing and taking the exact shape of the bone cells. What we find today is not the bone itself, but a perfect rock replica, a stone casting of a life that once was, often colored by the specific minerals in the soil, red from iron or black from manganese. While bones and teeth are hard enough to survive this transition with some regularity, soft tissues like skin, muscle, and feathers almost always vanish without a whisper. Yet there are rare and magical sites known by the German term Lagerstätten, meaning storage places, where the conditions were so chemically perfect that even soft tissues were preserved. In these quiet lagoons or stagnating seabeds, oxygen levels were so low that bacteria could not do their work to break down the body. Here, the sediment acted like a soft blanket, capturing the delicate impression of a feather, the outline of a stomach, or the texture of scales. These exceptional sites give us our only true glimpse into the soft reality of these animals, turning a skeleton into a fully realized, textured being, and proving that the fossil record still holds secrets waiting in the stone. When we look beyond the famous giants that dominate museum halls, we find that evolution was in a playful, almost experimental mood during the Mesozoic era, producing creatures that defy our expectations of what a dinosaur should look like. Some of these obscure species appear less like biological realities and more like sketches from a fantasy novel. Consider the Nigersaurus, a sauropod that took the long-necked body plan and adapted it for a very specific low-level grazing lifestyle. Its most peculiar feature was its mouth, which was not narrow or pointed, but shaped remarkably like the nozzle of a vacuum cleaner. Its jaw was wider than the rest of its skull, a broad, flat trap lined with hundreds of slender teeth packed into the very front of its mouth. It did not chew, it simply mowed, cropping ferns and soft ground vegetation with a mechanized efficiency that is unlike anything we see in the modern world. While the Nigersaurus was strange, Other dinosaurs were a baffling mix of terrifying features and gentle behaviors. The Therizinosaurus is perhaps the greatest example of this contradiction. For years, paleontologists only knew this animal by its claws, massive scythe-like blades that measured over 3 feet in length. It was natural to assume these belonged to a nightmare predator, a slasher of the ancient forests, capable of taking down any rival. However, once a complete skeleton was finally assembled, the truth proved to be far more surprising. These formidable weapons were attached to a pot-bellied, wide-hipped, sluggish giant that ate nothing but plants. It likely used those 3-foot swords not to hunt, but to gently hook onto tree branches to pull leafy boughs closer to its mouth, or perhaps to strip bark from trunks.
It creates a striking mental image of a peaceful giant wandering the woods, armed with the most terrifying weapons in history, yet using them only for gardening. This blend of the bizarre and the beautiful continues with a small dinosaur discovered in China known as Yi-Chi. For a long time, the line between dinosaur and bird seemed clear, defined by feathers and rigid wings. Yi-Chi broke the mold entirely by possessing membranous wings made of skin stretched between long fingers and a wrist bone, much like a bat or a mythical dragon. It glided through the Jurassic canopy, a biological oddity that proves nature was testing out many different ways to conquer the air, long before birds perfected the art of flight. These creatures remind us that the past was filled with shapes and forms that challenge our imagination. Speaking of imagination, as you drift closer to sleep, do you find that your dreams are vivid and cinematic, filled with strange creatures and landscapes? Or do you tend to rest deeply without remembering your nightly journeys? This sense of wonder extends to the Dinosaurs, a dinosaur that remained a mystery for 50 years. Known originally only by a pair of massive disembodied arms found in the Gobi Desert, it was dubbed Terrible Hand. When the rest of the animal was finally found, it turned out to be a humped, duck-billed omnivorous giant that looked like a patchwork of 3 different animals sewn together, proving once again that the Earth's history is stranger than we could ever invent. Yet the most profound chapter in their history is not how they lived, but how their reign abruptly concluded. 66 million years ago, the biological narrative of the planet was rewritten in a single afternoon. A rock roughly 6 miles wide or 10 kilometers in diameter was traveling through the vacuum of space on a collision course with Earth. It is difficult to truly comprehend the scale of such an object. Imagine a mountain larger than Mount Everest, ripped from its roots and hurled through the sky at 45,000 miles per hour. This cosmic wanderer, which we now identify as the Chicxulub asteroid, struck the shallow waters off the coast of what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. The energy released upon impact defies conventional measurement, estimated to be equivalent to billions of atomic bombs detonating simultaneously, a force so great that it momentarily liquefied the Earth's crust. The collision punched a hole in the atmosphere and excavated a crater over 100 miles wide and 12 miles deep. But it was not the impact itself that doomed the dinosaurs globally. It was the atmospheric aftermath. When the asteroid struck, it pulverized the sulfur-rich rocks of the ocean floor, blasting vast quantities of vaporized rock and sulfur aerosols high into the stratosphere. As this ejected material reached the edge of space, it cooled and began to rain back down upon the Earth. The friction of billions of these tiny glass beads, known as spherules, re-entering the atmosphere turned the sky into a global broiler. For several hours, the air temperature spiked dramatically, and the sky glowed with an intense, radiant heat. Following this heat came the silence and the cold. The dust and soot that remained suspended in the upper atmosphere formed a dense, dark veil that circled the globe, blocking out the sun for months, perhaps even years. This phenomenon, often described as an impact winter, caused temperatures to plummet and photosynthesis to halt. Without sunlight, the lush Cretaceous forests withered, and the microscopic plankton in the oceans died off. This collapse at the base of the food chain sent a shockwave upward. The great herbivores like the horned Triceratops and the long-necked Titanosaurs could no longer find enough food to fuel their massive bodies. As they vanished, the predators that hunted them, including the mighty Tyrannosaurus rex, eventually succumbed to starvation as well. It is a somber reflection to realize that the dinosaurs did not fail in their evolution. They were simply the victims of terrible timing and cosmic chance. Had the asteroid arrived a few moments later, the rotation of the Earth might have caused it to strike the deep ocean rather than the shallow shelf, potentially lessening the ejection of climate-altering dust. Instead, the world fell into a deep slumber. Yet in this dark, cold world, life found a way to endure. While the non-avian dinosaurs perished, small, resourceful creatures managed to survive. Tiny mammals, our distant ancestors, were able to burrow underground to escape the heat and the cold, scavenging on roots and insects in the dark. Alongside them, one lineage of dinosaurs also clung to life. These were the avian dinosaurs, the birds. Small, mobile, and capable of eating seeds and diverse foods, they weathered the storm. Today, the ghost of this event is visible in the geology of the Yucatan. A ring of beautiful freshwater sinkholes called cenotes outlines the buried rim of the ancient crater, a silent, watery memorial to the day the world changed. This catastrophic reset button cleared the stage for the rise of mammals, proving that in the story of life, every ending is merely the precursor to a new beginning. That beginning belonged to a group of small, feathered creatures that were already living in the shadows of the giants. While the massive sauropods and fearsome tyrannosaurs could not adapt to a world plunged into darkness and cold, the avian dinosaurs, the ancestors of modern birds, possessed a unique toolkit for survival. It is a profound realization that the age of dinosaurs never truly ended. It simply evolved into a smaller, more aerodynamic form. Every bird you see, from the humble pigeon pecking at the sidewalk to the majestic eagle soaring on thermal currents, is a direct, living descendant of the theropod dinosaurs. They are not merely cousins or relatives. In the strict scientific classification of cladistics, birds are dinosaurs. That beginning belonged to a group of small, feathered creatures that were already living in the shadows of the giants. While the massive sauropods and fearsome tyrannosaurs could not adapt to a world plunged into darkness and cold, the avian dinosaurs, the ancestors of modern birds, possessed a unique toolkit for survival. It is a profound realization that the age of dinosaurs never truly ended. It simply evolved into a smaller, more aerodynamic form. Every bird you see, from the humble pigeon pecking at the sidewalk to the majestic eagle soaring on thermal currents, is a direct, living descendant of the theropod dinosaurs. They are not merely cousins or relatives. In the strict scientific classification of cladistics, birds are dinosaurs. This survival was likely aided by their size and diet. When the asteroid impact caused global wildfires and a subsequent impact winter that killed off the vegetation, large herbivores starved, and the carnivores that hunted them followed suit.
However, early birds with toothless beaks were able to sift through the ash and debris to find seeds and hard-shelled invertebrates, a food source that remained viable even when the forests had withered. This biological resilience allowed the lineage to persist through the most catastrophic event in Earth's history. If you look closely at the legs of a chicken or a sparrow, you can see the family resemblance. The scales that cover their feet are physically identical to the scales that once covered the skin of their reptilian ancestors. These scutes are a lingering map of their heritage, a texture that has remained unchanged for tens of millions of years. Furthermore, the skeletal structure reveals deep connections. The wishbone, or furcula, which we associate with holiday turkeys, was present in non-avian dinosaurs like the velociraptor and the T-Rex, serving as a structural brace for the chest long before it was adapted for powered flight. Even the way birds breathe is a prehistoric inheritance. Dinosaurs possessed a highly efficient, unidirectional respiratory system where air flows through the lungs in one constant direction, aided by a network of air sacs throughout the body and even inside their hollow bones. This system allowed dinosaurs to extract oxygen far more efficiently than mammals do, which likely supported their immense size and active lifestyles. Today, that same supercharged respiratory system powers the high energy demands of flight, allowing a hummingbird to beat its wings 50 times a second without running out of breath. Behaviorally, the link is just as strong. Fossils of troodontids have been found curled up in sleep positions almost identical to modern ducks, with their heads tucked under a wing for warmth. Spectacular finds, like the Psittacipodi fossils, show parents sitting directly on top of their clutches of eggs, brooding them with the same protective instinct we see in nesting robins today. It invites a quiet wonder to consider that when you watch a bird tending to its nest in your garden, you are witnessing a ritual that has been performed continuously, without interruption, for over 100 million years. Have you ever watched a bird in your yard and suddenly noticed the intense reptilian intelligence in its gaze? The extinction event was a filter, not a wall. It stripped away the giants, but it left behind the adaptable, the small, and the hidden, setting the stage for the rise of mammals and eventually the curious species that now digs up the past to understand its own origins. As we reach the end of our long journey through the Mesozoic era, we are left with a profound sense of connection to this deep history. We have traveled through hundreds of millions of years tonight, visualizing a world that was lush, vibrant, and fiercely alive long before a human eye was there to witness it. The legacy of the dinosaurs teaches us about the exquisite fragility of dominance and the stubborn, beautiful resilience of life. They show us that the Earth is always changing, always cycling through eras of ice and warmth, yet life remains a constant golden thread woven through the chaos. There is a deep comfort in this vastness. Knowing that the planet has endured so much allows us to put our own fleeting moments into a gentler perspective. We walk on the same crust that once supported the weight of the titanosaurs. We breathe the same recycled air that once filled the lungs of the triceratops. The timeline continues unbroken, and we are simply the current stewards drifting through our own epoch in the dark. As you let go of the waking world, let the image of those ancient fern-filled forests soothe your mind. The thunder of the past has quieted into the silence of the stones beneath our feet, waiting patiently to be discovered. If you found peace in these ancient mysteries and wish to support our work, please subscribe to the channel to join us for more relaxing facts and science for sleep in the future. There are always more secrets to uncover in the quiet hours, and we would love to have you with us for the next exploration. For now, let the long, slow rhythm of geologic time lull you into a heavy, restorative slumber. The history of the world is a long story, and tonight, you have earned your rest within it. Good night.